I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Maren Kate Donovan is an entrepreneur. She's the founder of Zirtual, an online virtual assistant service, and she also has a new company called Indie. Now, Maren has some invaluable advice. It's all a result of her personal experience, and I'm very grateful that she's willing to speak so openly about that experience. In 2015, Maren was running her company, Zirtual, as the CEO, and at the time, the company had an $11 million run rate. It appeared to be very healthy. Due to some factors that Maren speaks about very candidly in this episode, the company suddenly came to a halt, and overnight, they had to let go of more than 400 employees. So how does this situation happen? Maren will explain. She also talks about what she did next and how she got through the situation. As I've mentioned many times on the show, I feel strongly that entrepreneurs need to share their stories and lessons in order to pay them forward so we can help people avoid the same mistakes. I appreciate Maren's willingness to be vulnerable because she does just that in this episode. Before we get started, I want to tell you about my partners at Design Pickle. You know when you're in a pickle because you need a design, but you don't have the time or maybe even the skill to do it yourself. Many of us have been there. Design Pickle has been a lifesaver for me. Here's how they're set up. You pay a flat rate monthly fee of $370, and you're given a dedicated designer for all of your needs. You heard that right. Unlimited graphic designs, unlimited requests, and the first 14 days are risk-free. You get a full refund if you cancel in the first 2 weeks. Why Not Now listeners like yourself get 30% off their first month, which means you only pay $259 for your first month at Design Pickle. You can go to designpickle.com/why not now to redeem the offer. For me, the process has been painless and ego-free. In fact, many of the posts you're seeing on my social media channels were created by my buddies at Design Pickle, specifically Jacob at Design Pickle. That's what's cool, is that you get a dedicated designer. I'm on a first-name basis with my designer. A mentor once said to me, just because you can doesn't always mean you should. Do what you're uniquely qualified to do. Design Pickle helps me do just that. So your first month is only $259. Go to designpickle.com/why not now to redeem the offer. Maren, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing really good.
Good. Let's hop right in. I'm excited to have you on. Let's dive into a why not now. Can you share a time when you had to ask yourself that question? And we will talk it through, dissect it, and zoom in.
Yeah, I think the first why not now moment I had was when I was living in Reno, starting a company that would become my first bigger venture-backed business. And Reno's only 4 hours away from San Francisco, and I used to always read articles about Silicon Valley and different startups there, and it was around the time the Facebook movie came out, and I was just hacking away on my business in my little apartment, and got the idea of applying to an incubator in San Francisco. And I was like, if I get into this, then I'm going to just go. And there was a train that ran from Reno to San Francisco. It took 8 hours. And I got into the incubator after like 3 tries. They kept telling me no, but I was like, I'll commute from Reno. Like, that's got to mean something. And I got on the train with my little backpack and went all the way to San Francisco, and then hopped on another train and went to Mountain View for this. And that was for 3 months. And I don't know what it was exactly that clicked, but there was just something that I was like, if I put it off any longer, I'm really going to regret it. And I just decided to kind of like jump the gun, jump on the train.
And so you got the spot, or did you mean you moved to San Francisco?
So moved in quotation marks. For the first 3 months, I was living in a hostel, and on the weekends, I would commute back to Reno because I had my ex-boyfriend live there, or my current boyfriend, who was now my ex-boyfriend, and we had 2 cats together. So I would come back on the weekends. But for 3 months, I would live in this hostel in downtown San Francisco, and then take the Caltrain another hour to Mountain View, where this incubator was that I did get into.
So you really you were invested. That's quite the commute for sure. What was the tipping point? What was that moment that you decided to just do it? Did something happen that day, or was it a certain thought?
I'd been starting little businesses since I was in college, but I never fully. I always had bartending and like cocktail waitress jobs on the side. So I had my business, online, school, and then bartending. And it was like I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I wasn't fully putting both feet in. And I think something just clicked. I think I was working at one of my bar gigs, and I was like, if I keep doing this, I will always kind of just wonder what if. And if I take this risk, like it's a big risk. I'm quitting all my jobs. I'm only relying on the income I make online, and I'm going to be spending all this time out there with people I don't know. But I just kind of knew that if I didn't take that risk now, like I would regret it. It was almost like a sixth sense. And it was really hard, especially the first 6 months being in San Francisco. I didn't know a soul, but it's definitely by far one of the best decisions I've ever made, if not the best decision.
And was this Zirtual, the beginning of Zirtual?
Yeah. Yep.
It was. Wow. Okay. And so then what happens next? I mean, what's unique, I think, to our stories is that we both shared, I'd say, a mentor and an investor in Tony Hsieh. And that's how we met. But that's down the road, I imagine, a little bit. So you're going from point A to B, which I guess is you're in San Francisco, things start working, and you realize you have something hot on your hands?
Well, it took a while. In the incubator, pretty much they told me that the idea I had, which did turn into Zirtual, the virtual executive assistant service, was crappy and that I should try all these different ones. And I did try a few different iterations that different experts had suggested I try. And the incubator was over. I was living in like the smallest studio in the world in the Tenderloin, which is a rough and dirty area of San Francisco, and working out of Starbucks where I'd plug in, use the free Wi-Fi, and just work. And at some point, again, that moment happened where I was like, you know what? I know everybody says that I should be building XYZ app, but I'm just going to try my original idea, which was getting some traction. So that started picking up. I reached out to 2 friends of mine, one that I'd met over the internet, a guy named Colin Vine, a Canadian entrepreneur who had read my blog. I had a blog since I was like 21 about not pursuing a traditional career path, and a good friend of mine from Reno who was an art director, and he had just quit his job and was kind of trying to figure out what's next. And I told them, hey guys, I'm living in this shitty little studio in the Tenderloin. I'm working on this idea. If you guys want, you should fly out here and see if you can help me with it. And both of them flew out within about a month of each other. And for the next 6 months, we all lived in my studio together, and they became my co-founders. And it kind of started growing from there.
So much happened from, I imagine, that point to 2015. And what year was that you actually started Zirtual? or at least the incubator?
January of 2011.
11. Okay. So I just had this idea of if you were to just list the top most kind of intense, let's say 5 moments of your journey with Zirtual, what would they be? What comes to mind? And not really overthinking it, but there's such a story here, and I want you to be able to share, but also we only have so much time.
The first would be getting into that incubator. Even though it wasn't like a huge turning point, it made me feel like it gave me some sort of legitimacy in my own mind. The second would be getting to a point where I had more clients than I could personally handle. I was the first executive assistant. I called myself Sarah, and I, then that's when Eric and Colin came in. I was like, hey guys, I need some help. Fly out here. The third would probably be when the 3 of us no longer were actually doing the assistant work, when we hired our first 3 employees who I just am still talked to and were absolute dolls. The first 3 girls that worked with us as executive assistants. And then the fourth moment would probably be when we raised our first round of funding, and that was $2 million, led by Tony. And that was more money than I could even fathom at that time. It just didn't even seem real. We were profitable. We were growing pretty fast. And then the fifth landmark, the really good one, was that we got to a point where we were several hundred assistants and many thousand clients. And then the flip side of that landmark was when the business actually kind of had to shut its doors, both because we grew kind of too fast to balance out with. It sounds weird, but it's like it's a dual-sided coin in my mind. We had a ton of growth and a lot of clients and a lot of new assistants, but that, because of some mistakes that were made, and definitely many on my part, that success was kind of the ultimate undoing of the company or the dream, so to speak. So those would be the 5 if I had to think of it off the top of my head.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Maren. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri. Yep, the original before you go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you know what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code Why Not Now. That's all one word. Also, you can now get Poo-Pourri at Target. Thank you for sharing, and I think I have many things to follow up on various points, and one of which, and we'll get to that dual-sided coin, because I think, and we don't have to spend too much time on it because I know you've shared your thoughts and story before, but I think it's just so helpful and valuable to
Absolutely.
listeners, because a lot of people who listen to this show, and Why Not Now can be anything in life. It could be a very personal change, decision, transformation. It could be professional. A lot of people translate it to becoming an entrepreneur. So there's a lot to glean. But one of my first questions, and this has been on my mind quite a bit lately as I look back at raising money, and when I went out and went through that process, when you went out and raised the $2 million, and then looking back now, and if we look macro at the scenario and kind of scene of startups, do you think people are over raising?
For sure. Absolutely, hands down. I think that I didn't even know raising money was like a thing until I moved to San Francisco. I had only been around traditional businesses where there's loans from banks, but not like venture capital. So I think that after a few years in the Valley, it just seemed like it was normal. And there's definitely, you buy into the, You buy into the story of raise a lot of money, grow really fast, rocket ship, yada, yada, yada. But I don't think enough people talk about the inverse of that, which is when things don't go, perfect. And companies are closing all the time, especially companies that have raised gobs of money, like not a few $1,000,000, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that it would be very wise, both financially astute and also just personally, it's important for potential founders to think about what cost comes with raising money, because everything has a cost.
Absolutely. It's something that I hope more entrepreneurs ask themselves in terms of, what do I need the money for? And we get caught up and we watch our Shark Tank and we hear about Silicon Valley and we watch the movies and hear about these unicorn companies. But, you're really giving away not only a lot of control usually, but that growth rate and having a natural growth rate versus an overly accelerated can harm, if not shut down the business, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I never really knew the term until it happened to us, which was the idea of growing broke, where if your unit economics aren't perfectly aligned, which often this is why people raise money after money after money, is because they're losing money, they're growing, they're getting bigger and bigger, but they're, for every penny or dollar they take in, they spend $1.10. And that game of musical chairs only works as long as more money comes in. The moment money stops, no matter how fast growth, how big the company is, if you are in the negative dollars, it just doesn't work anymore. And I think that's something that it's one of the reasons I wanted to be so open about my story after what happened with Zirtual, was because I wanted people to understand that, hey, this is a potential that happens as well. Because I think often, obviously, we only hear the glitzy, glamoury, unicorny story.
Yes, absolutely. And when you're in constant fundraising mode, that is a full-time job, right? It's very difficult to run a business
sure.
and focus on the core of the business and what it needs when you're constantly out trying to catch up and that burn rate is chasing you, literally taking up so much energy.
Alternately, you don't necessarily make the right decisions for who matters the most. And who matters the most is your customers and then the people that are helping you deliver whatever product it is. When you're raising venture funds, there's a very specific type of metrics and numbers and criteria they're looking to see. And even though it's not explicitly said that, hey, you have to build your business around this criteria, it's something that it's like in the water. You start worrying about month over month growth. You start worrying about how your slide decks will look. You start worrying about what trajectory are you on. You look at quarter by quarter numbers versus what's overall good for the business. And I think that's another really important thing that people need to consider before raising venture capital when they think about what kind of business they want to create. And
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so ultimately, just to wrap this up, and I'm excited to talk about what you're focused on now, your new why not now. But ultimately with Zirtual, the burn rate kind of spiraled out of control, right? So it's
absolutely.
Although you were like an $11 million a year company, the optics and I guess I'll use vanity metrics as a term, started to kind of blur the
There were
vision.
3 big problems, and the number one was we decided to move from independent contractors to employees, and we did that to be on the right side of tax law. We did it for the right reasons. Our workers were really excited about it, but sadly, we didn't really take into consideration the long-term financial implications. And at the end of the day, as CEO, that's on me. We also made a really poor choice in our outsourced CFO firm. It was one that one of our VCs recommended to us, and they said, we've had lots of startups that have used him. He's great. And it turned out he was just absolutely awful. And as a person that comes from a non-finance background, I didn't realize soon enough, wow, this person they're putting together projections that month after month don't add up. Like, I need to ring the alarm bell a lot earlier. And then the last reason was really something super simple, and I realized this in retrospection, is that I didn't ask for help enough and didn't weigh kind of the what ifs when you think about, hey, if everything doesn't work out perfectly, because entrepreneurs have a lot of blind optimism, like we have to be super optimistic to make things happen. But at the same time, especially when you're starting to run up against some pretty serious like burn rates and pretty critical issues in terms of the people you've brought on to help with financing, stuff like that, a lot of times you have to think in terms of plan B, plan C. And I think that blind optimism that no matter what, I'm going to make this work, and that not asking for help earlier on was a big way that I failed, that I let the company down, and because of my naivety, just didn't really see coming. So great lessons to take away from it, but not ideal lessons when it happens.
Well, and these are somewhat taboo topics, and I really appreciate you sharing so publicly and being vulnerable, because you're going to save someone else from going through the pain that you had to go through. And we've talked a lot about the business side, but then what happened next? So you've transformed. Here you are, and it is a couple years later, but what have the last couple of years been like? And how did you, the day after, the week after, month after, all of this abruptly kind of publicly happened? I will never forget reading about this. And what happened with you? That's a lot.
Yeah, I'll say one thing. One thing that I was lucky in a way that I'd met a woman randomly at Burning Man, actually, and she was had an amazing energy, really, really deep presence, and her name is Fleur, like the flower, and she was actually a burnout coach, or is a burnout coach, and helps people, especially founders who are burning out. And we got coffee just as friends a few weeks after, and she just gave me some great book recommendations, and I don't even remember the words that she said, but it resonated that I needed to just take a few months, and I needed to kind of just take care of myself, just decompress. And for a few months, I was lucky that I was living with my boyfriend, who was super supportive at the time, and just said, take some time off, don't worry about it, I'll take care of the bills. And I just went to the cafe, I read books, I drank tea, I kind of fed my pigeons, which is a giant passion of mine. And for a few months, I didn't do anything. I didn't read any of the articles that came out because the press was pretty negative, and understandably so. I didn't get on social media for 3 months. I did pretty much nothing for 3 months, and I think it literally saved my psyche.
And you go through that process, which in a way I imagine felt fairly lonely at times, but here you are, and I imagine, learned a ton.
Yeah.
But you're moving forward, and I guess I've heard the term fail forward before, and it just comes to mind, not that the F word is so, the semantics are semantics, but I watch you from afar, and I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with the grace that you've had over the last couple of years, and that takes a lot of self-work, I imagine. What are you up to now? And I guess I can pose it as, is there anything you've been thinking about doing that now you're going to do? Let's talk about the future for you.
Yeah, it was really interesting. As we were coming up on this recording, I was listening to some of your episodes. I've had it on and listened to the show over the last few months, and I was realizing that in the last month, I've had kind of a second why not now moment, which it's been 2 years since Zirtual, a little over 2 years, and I've worked as a consultant, I've done some operating roles, but I've kind of had an idea for a new business in the back of my head, but I just haven't been willing to pull the trigger, and I just think it's being gun shy, it's having a little bit of entrepreneurial PTSD. And this last month, I've been reading a lot of personal development books, talking to a lot of people, just recently moved up to New York. And just something hit me one day laying in bed was, it's kind of like the right time, like grab the present. And I decided to start a new company that's actually almost an iteration of my last company. It takes something that we did really, really well at Zirtual, which was develop a very detailed hiring ecosystem for bringing onboarding lots of people, a hiring ecosystem that scaled as we scale. And it was something that me and my co-founders built from scratch. It was one of my favorite parts of the business, was how robust our recruiting and onboarding efforts were. And I've decided to create my new firm, which is pretty much focused on helping startups build best-in-class recruiting ecosystems. So they build them early on, so as they scale, they're not stuck in a position where they need a lot of new people and they just kind of hire without really understanding what they're hiring for, and also taking a lot of the bias out of some of the hiring process. So it's just one of those things where it clicked, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put my hat back in the ring, and regardless what happens, I'm going to jump in again. And it actually feels really good. I thought it would be a lot more terrifying.
Good for you. Good for you. And I appreciate this service, and I wish I had it when I was recruiting so quickly. I think because so often startups, founders and CEOs, they tend to lean toward the people they trust, even though they may not be qualified, right? And I know I did it a few times where you just figure, we'll figure it out. At least I can trust them. And that's your biggest fear, is that you're not going to be able to trust, but really you need that skill set and that core competency too, and need to be thinking way beyond that one hire. And so that's very interesting. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you're laying in bed one day and you decided to green light it, it sounds like, but it had been
Yeah.
brewing. Yeah.
Yeah, it had been brewing, and I think I just kind of get to a point where I was like, everybody's good at usually 1 to 2 things. Some people are great at 3 or 4. But I realized that I tried consulting at different stuff, and I realized that, you know what, there's one thing I'm good at, or I'm better than most people at, and that's putting together an idea, building a team around that idea, and kind of, motivating them and putting them forward. And I just decided to, I don't know, shake myself by the lapels and be like, don't be a pansy. Get up there and do it. If this is what you want to do, if this is what you feel like is your calling, if this is what makes you happy, there's no reason. The worst case scenario is, doesn't work. And that's after kind of failing in a grandiose way. That's not nearly as scary. It takes a lot of the bite out of it, and it encourages you to try things again. And actually, an investor, an entrepreneur, gave me a phenomenal piece of advice the other day. He actually said, he's like, listen, he's like, take all that you've learned from your last company and imagine it as a really expensive MBA that someone paid for you. He's like, so there's going to be specific skill sets. There's going to be specific things that you've learned, and they have to do with HR, recruiting, distributed workforces, etc. He's like, why wouldn't you take that $1 million MBA and reinvest it into a company in a similar space? He's like, you'll have leverage points that other people wouldn't. And I just thought that was brilliant, and it really kind of stuck with me. Great way of reframing, something going wrong by saying, hey, I now know a lot more on this subject than someone starting fresh.
Yeah, it makes you a voice of authority for sure. And it's also not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, to use a cliche, but it's a lot of value still there that can take on a different look and feel and concept, and much bigger actually. That was just your first round. So the day you're
it's a good way of thinking
you're
about
getting
it.
your PhD now, right? So how did you enforce the decision and take action that day you decided, okay, I'm going to get serious about this? What did you do?
So I hit up a few people that I've worked with in the past, asking one of my co-founders to be an advisor, going to people that I really knew and trusted and respected and said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. Like, what are your thoughts? And that kind of set that initial social, almost peer pressure. And then I did something that I always try to do when I commit to a business. I went out and I hired an intern almost immediately. And it kind of forces me, it's like, okay, you now have someone you're going to be paying. So you better, get serious, like sit up and fly straight.
That's
It's almost
such
an
a good.
extreme version of acting as if.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love that you do that. So the hiring of the intern is so accessible and attainable for
Yep.
most people. And in a lot of cases, you may not even have to pay that much, hopefully, if they're getting school credit, or you want to be fair, make sure it's on the up and up. But that's such a cool tactic for, like you said, sitting up straight and taking it serious. Plus,
Yeah,
then you
and
have to give them something to do. I mean, interns can be
exactly.
a pain in the butt if you don't.
It forces that accountability. And also, one of the nice things about being an entrepreneur, and if you have started anything or done anything to any kind of acclaim in the professional world, you actually have a ton to teach someone who's much more junior in their professional life. And so it really turns into a win-win, which is kind of what I search for in most of the things I do. And then the super basic psychological point of, hey, I'm paying this person and I need to give them something to do, and I'm going to make sure that I don't put things off because I have someone pinging me on Slack asking me, hey, what's going on? So then I started setting up weekly meetings, drew a few other people in. And then most recently what I did is I created a blog for the company. The company's called Indie, and created a blog, started writing articles, started getting quotes from people, and then posted publicly on a blog post and on Facebook that, hey, after like kind of 2 years hiding out, I'm deciding to make this leap. And all of those things are done to almost mentally gear me up to really put 150% in it again.
Oh, I love these takeaways. They're so unique too. I mean, the idea of telling people and going out and getting some feedback, but also it sounds like your decision was made. So it wasn't hey, I want to know if you think I should do this or not. It was more of, guide me in, and I'm doing this.
Yep.
That sense of accountability, we call that, if you want to take the island, you burn your boat, right? You make it a social thing and hold yourself accountable. But the intern side of things is really cool, and I hope a lot of people consider this for themselves, because it's not just you too. And
it's like if you want to make a city your home and you just move to a new apartment, get a puppy, because then you're going to be going out and you're going to meet people, and you have a responsibility to another person besides yourself, someone to hold you accountable. And also it's value on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely love that. So here you are, you're living in New York City, and your days, and I imagine, has your world shifted since you made that decision? I can only imagine the calendar and the pace. Has there been an adjustment to kind of acclimating to this world again, or has it been pretty smooth?
It feels like coming home. It feels,
wow.
What felt weird is the last 2 years of working for other companies and doing project work and not having my own team and not having this kind of like overarching vision I'm following. That's what felt odd. This feels absolutely like second skin.
Good for you. I'm so happy for you. Couple rapid fire questions for you.
Sure.
What are you reading right now?
I just finished a book called The Holographic Universe, and I cannot recommend it enough. I'm also not good enough to explain what it really is about, but it's about kind of the nature of reality and looking at quantum physics and also looking at spirituality and religion. And it's a fun read, and it is phenomenal.
Ooh, sounds very good. I'm going to pick that up. Thank you so much. What keeps you up at night?
Not a lot, because I'm a phenomenal sleeper. Like, I could gold medal in sleeping. If
Ooh.
I could sleep all day. So few things keep me up at night.
That's awesome. That's not a bad thing at all. And pirates or ninjas? Who's tougher?
Pirates. They don't have anything to lose. You never want to fight a man that doesn't have anything to lose. Ninjas have like a moral code.
Okay. I always love the rationale. I love to hear it speaks volumes about people. New question. How do you take yourself from crappy to happy really quickly?
Oh, that's an easy one. Gratitude. I just think that there's a lot of studies on this, and both from spirituality and just like the scientific world. But the moment I don't feel great, if I catch myself feeling sorry for myself, I just think of all the things I have to be grateful for, even if it's something as basic like I had enough money in my pocket to get a coffee, or there's a cute little bird on the sidewalk. And that always readjusts my head real fast.
I love that. Very, very good takeaway. And final question, what would you tell your younger self? And you can choose which age that might be.
Honestly, I wouldn't tell my younger self anything, because anything I would want to tell myself would be allowing me to skip a level of learning or some part of the painful journey. Lots of different things has happened in my life since I was a little kid. And if I didn't experience all of those the way I did and go through the dark times, I don't think I would be the person I am right now. So I wouldn't want to spoil that, even having to live through that stuff. It's hard to assume that we are so omnipotent that we know what would happen if we went back and even gave ourselves this tiny, tiny bit of advice. I feel like it could throw off the whole kit and caboodle. So I would never do that.
That's a unique answer for sure, and I appreciate it. It's, we're not necessarily meant to take shortcuts. So
I believe in that wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fun, and I'm excited to follow up with you and hear how things are going with your new company. Congrats.
Thanks so much.
And thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. It was great chatting.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?